This is our rebuilt 1000 horsepower Hellcat. But I said this thing was rebuilt. So what happened to it? So yes, we did rebuild this car about 2 years ago, but something went pretty bad on it. So we bought the car like this, and when we were building it, it was going pretty great. It was just some side damage and it didn't have a key, so we programmed a key. Got this car completely great. If you guys haven't seen those videos already, I'll have it linked down below, and I'll have the playlist right here in this iCard. And I'll have the playlist right here in this iCard. But guys, this car essentially over time, it developed a rod knock issue. So we went ahead and we brought the car back into the shop and we fixed the rod knock. And let's just say that engine went completely kaputski. It completely destroyed itself and that engine was done for. Again, all those videos are in the playlist. So since all that has happened to this car, we went ahead, we dropped a new engine in on it, and we got it all into place, guys. And now it's time to get this thing back on the road. So we did get the engine back into the car, but there's still tons of stuff to do on this car. We have to plug in a bunch of hoses and put in a lot of bolts onto this engine. You guys see this tiny grain of rice right here? This is about how many bolts we have left to put back on this engine. Before we get started, if that subscribe button down there doesn't say subscribe, then go ahead and tap it. And if it does say subscribe, then go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. It's all free and free things are really cool. And do me a favor, follow the Instagram channel for behind the scenes and cool photos and videos. Now, let's go ahead and get on with it. While rebuilding this car, we found out that this car actually is pushing almost 1000 horsepower with the smaller pulleys and the ported supercharger and the intake system and all that goody goodness that this car came equipped with when we bought it. That was something we didn't know this car had when we got it, but we found out while we were rebuilding it. We also wide-bodied the car in the process because when you have that much power, you need some wider tires so you can be able to stick that power. So we did wide-body the car too while we were rebuilding it. And this car was also like a nice magenta pinkish type of color. It comes a little pinkish on camera, but it's like a little magenta-y color. And that's what was on the car right there. But we are changing it to matte black. That's why this car is completely changed now and it's unwrapped into this plum crazy purple color right here. I know a lot of people would want to keep this plum crazy purple color too. And I do. But we're just going to try something new and we're going to wrap it. Later on, we'll go ahead and paint this car and make it look extremely slick like that. But we're going to go for a stealth look on this car right now. And you guys may have noticed that there's some issues right there with the paint. That the clear coat peeled off when we took off the wrap because it didn't have enough time to cure before we wrapped it, which I knew that would happen. But it's okay because we can always go ahead and repaint it. Plus, the clear coat that we used, I didn't even like it that much. So I wanted to repaint this car. Now, are we going to start it and drive it in today's video? Probably not, but are we gonna try? You bet your petunias we are. Those bolts have no business being that hard to get to, those motor mounts, but they're in. All right, let's get these wires through the engine. Sweet, and this is here too now, great. Supercharger lifter things are on. I don't know what you call these. Another addition to stealthing out this car, we went ahead and painted in the supercharger lid black with red speckles. It's gonna look absolutely sick, guys, when this car's completely put together and stealthed it out. Yeah. Alright, so Hellcat's coming out really good. Got this engine in, got everything all bolted down. Underside of the car's looking great. Tossed the supercharger on, still got it bolted up. But it's getting late and it's about to start storming, so I'll see you all in the next clip. It is like 3 weeks later, but I don't know, can you tell? So yes, it has been a while, but it wasn't for nothing, guys. First of all, we were working on a bunch of builds. We were finishing up that Supra, and the other thing was we were waiting for parts on this car right here. And we did get a new starter in because, unfortunately, our old one did take a piston to the side of it. So this is the old one, clearly. So we have a bunch of new parts now, guys. And my goal today and for this video is to get this thing started and driving. And of course, by looking at the car, it does look a bit optimistic. But I believe we can do it. We got this in the bag. So in the last clips, you guys saw that we went ahead and dropped this motor in. We put the supercharger on. We still got to bolt it up. As you guys can see, the bolts are there. And you guys may have noticed that we put like those little spacer lifters under the supercharger. Since the supercharger is ported, it has a lot more heat shielding under it, so it doesn't make other parts of the engine too hot. So to make room for that, they added those little lifter spacer things that you put under the supercharger to raise it up a little bit. Definitely makes the engine look a lot more beefier with the supercharger raised up a tad bit more, but it's not just for the looks, it's functional. It's for the heat shielding that's under the supercharger. So that's a pretty cool thing about this car. The other thing is we got those motor mounts in, which are so difficult. Dodge, can you be more like GM where they have the motor mount bolts from the underside of the subframe? You can literally just go under the car and take them out. It's so easy. On this car, you got to fish your hands through the top side of the engine. Like, look at that, guys. There's barely any room right there, so it's pretty tough. But we went ahead and we got that all in. And then we also went ahead and just plugged in a bunch of stuff on this car. Got this thing completely in here. This engine is not going anywhere, guys. Like, it's in there for good. There's a ground cable in the back, this one right here to be precise, and that was so difficult to put in there. As you guys can see how tight of a spot it's in. And then not only that, but figuring out where to put it was hard too. Found out from some pictures I had, it does go on the backside of like the transmission on like a nut. That just grounds the engine to the chassis, gives it good ground, so you know your engine block and everything works as it should. But now it's time to cool off. No, not you, the car. Oh, right. That's right, guys. So it is time to go ahead and put a cooling system into this car. That's the first step in getting this thing running and driving, because not only do we want to start this thing, but we want to drive it. So we got to make sure that we can fill it up with some fluids. So we do have coolant there too. That's concentrate. So we do have to dilute that with some distilled water, 50-50, and then it'll be mixed. And then there's obviously a couple odds and ends. Once we get this cooling system in, we have to plug in a lot of lines, a lot of hoses, make sure everything's plugged in. We have to pop in that starter and just do a checklist. Make sure that everything on this car is good to go for the first start. We have to put the radiator support on as well. Probably toss on the headlights, because for these Hellcat Challengers, their headlights are a pretty good signature detail to them. They look very cool with those halos. So we're probably going to pop those on so we can see this thing actually come to life. And then here we have the oil cooler for this car as well. And all these components that you guys see here, everything except for the transmission cooler, the radiator, the oil cooler, everything that you guys see here, and obviously minus the condenser, we have taken the liberty to go ahead and rinse out all these things. We flushed them all out with water, because when the engine exploded a couple videos ago, obviously when an engine explodes, it sends metal everywhere. It'll send metal into the oil. It'll send metal through the coolant jackets into the cooling system. So you got to make sure everything's cleaned out. And yes, metal did come out of there, but we kept flushing with water until it came out clean. These things have had plenty of time to dry, so we're ready to go ahead and pop them in the car now. So don't worry, guys, this thing is good to go. But that's enough about the cooling system. Let's just go ahead and put it in the car and get this thing one step closer to cranking on. Or cranking on. Not like this, because it's push button. Let's do it. Wow guys, this thing is really starting to take shape now. As you guys can see, I got these super cool headlights back on the car, but never mind that, the entire cooling system is on the car now with the radiator support or core support. That whole thing is on, that oil cooler down there, everything is plugged in. All the hoses are connected up, and might I remind you guys, we took this car apart a while ago, so it's definitely a challenge trying to remember where everything goes. Thankfully, the videos and pictures I have help a lot, and we got the car this far. Now, pretty much, it might be easy stuff next, but I might be speaking a little bit too soon, because the next thing we are going to be tackling on this car is this whole abundance of wires all over the car. We have to figure out where all of these go and plug them in. I think I'm going to start with the airbag sensors first, because those ones should be pretty easy to figure out. And then after we get all that plugged in, guys, we'll go ahead, put that intake back in, screw in the rest of all this stuff that's just lingering around in the car, and then it's time to go ahead and put some fluids in this thing and start it up, I'd say. So let's just go ahead, jump right into this mess of wiring and get it all plugged in, so we are one step closer to starting this car. But I must say I'm very happy with how this thing is coming out, but we're not quite done yet, so let's keep going. It looks kind of cute. All right, so finally we got every single wire plugged into the car. I got the airbox back on. I had to take the belt off to realign the supercharger, but after I got that screwed back in, went ahead and put the belt back on. Everything is nice and tidied up here. And we went ahead and we filled it with oil and topped off the power steering fluid. So we are ready to go ahead and put transmission fluid and coolant into this thing. And then we can start this thing. But under the car, I went ahead and I tightened up everything else, got the cats in, tidied up all the stuff that was laying low right there, went ahead and put in all the wires and brackets and plugged in the wires for the transmission. So we're pretty much ready for fluids, so I'm pretty excited. Let's go ahead and put some fluids in this thing. Okay, so cooling system is now completely filled. We're probably gonna have to top off transmission fluid after the car runs for a bit. Same with coolant. We're gonna have to see where all the fluid levels go once it starts up. But I think it's time. The battery's actually healthy, but just in case. Something's... Alright, so when we start the car, it just clicks. So I'm going to scan the car, and maybe there's an inertia switch or something that got triggered, and all I have to do is just clear the code, and then maybe the car will fire right up. Alright guys, so we went ahead and we got this whole car put back together, and we did get to the part where we were going to go ahead and start the car, and as you guys saw, all the car did was the starter clicked. So here's a couple things. First of all, my shirt is a different color. Yes, I didn't want to get my white shirt dirty when I was laying under the car, putting all the cats and putting the starter in, just buttoning up everything under there, so I did change my shirt. But what I'm thinking is, first of all, I was thinking maybe fuses. When the car's engine exploded, maybe it blew a couple fuses, or maybe an inertia switch got triggered. Scanned the car, no codes at all, no fuses blown. So now all I can think of is maybe the new starter that we bought that's actually used, it could be seized because it is pretty rusted. But I guess we'll find out. I know that there's an auto parts store down the street that does free starter and alternator testing, so I took it right back out. Took maybe like 5 minutes to take it out, and we're gonna go ahead and get it tested and see if it's working good. Putting in an engine into a car and buttoning all this stuff up, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of different components here working with each other. So if you dropped an engine in and you got started up with no problems the first time, you would have to be a magician or something, because it's pretty difficult to get that done. But guys, we thought we were going to be able to start this thing and maybe even drive it, but it looks like that did not happen yet. But who knows? It might happen soon. So here's what I'm thinking. This video is not going to end until this beast fires up. We're going to end this on a positive note, guys. So We got the starter tested and it is a good starter. It is slightly different though. According to the dealerships and all the sources that we've checked, this starter should still work with the car. It still fits in and everything plugs in as it should, but it's just slightly longer than the original one, but it should still work, at least a lot more than what came out of it. That starter was destroyed. But here's what I'm thinking, guys. We're gonna put the starter back in. I'm going to plug in the ambient air temperature sensor because I completely forgot to plug this in. This should not play a part in the car starting or not, but we're going to go ahead and put that in. And then here's the thing I forgot to check. I checked fuses, I checked grounds, but I forgot to check relays. So I know the exact relay for this car that's for the starter. I'm going to switch that relay with another relay for some other component. I know the car should fire up. We're going to stay optimistic. It will start up. So let's just go ahead. I'll pop the starter in, switch those relays, plug in this temperature sensor, and we're gonna fire this thing up. Let's do it. Okay, so this one's for the headlights. This one is for the starter. As you can see, starter. So we're gonna switch those two. Don't really need headlights right now. And this thing should fire up. Put this one in too. If the headlights don't turn on, then I'll know before anything that this relay is bad if the headlights don't turn on. Here's the starter. That's the new used one. That's the original. As you can see, this is the same. This part and this part are slightly longer, but this whole stuff is the same, which is where all the plugs and everything go. It still fits, so it should still work. All right, so starter is in now, and we did those little fixes. So now when I plug in the battery, we should see the headlights not turn on, and if they don't, then that's a really good sign. All right, guys, so when we switched the fuses around, we switched out, I was thinking that maybe the starter relay could be bad. So I switched the starter relay and the headlight relay, and I put the what was suspected to be the bad relay where the headlights go, but the headlights still worked. So that already draw out the conclusion that the relays were not bad. So I was looking around the car, I was looking under it, I was looking over it, seeing if I could find anything that looks out of place. And I directed my attention over here to this ECU to see if any of these connectors were in the wrong spot. And as I was doing that, I saw something wiggle in my peripheral vision, and those are two of the main engine grounds. Looked like that they're screwed down, but they're not. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten those up, guys, and this thing's gonna fire up. Alright guys, so we just tossed the hood onto the car and we closed the trunk and we closed all the doors and everything because for some reason the transmission is not going into gear. I went ahead and I scanned the car, and as far as transmission codes go, there's nothing in the transmission. We do have all these other things because there's still a couple things not plugged in onto the car, and the car also needs to drive a little bit to get rid of some of these other ones. So everything seems good. And of course there's also an aftermarket tune on the car, so it has detected that, so there is a code in the engine department too. But now that everything's on the car and we cleared all the other codes that were left because the ground being unplugged, we're going to start it up again and it should go into gear now. So as far as I remember, I do not think this car goes into gear if the hood is open. Now that it's closed, it should go into gear. That is so strange. Yes, optimism always wins, guys. We got this thing started up, and honestly, it could have been anything wrong with the engine. A wire could have gone and missed. Something could have not been aligned correctly. Like a bunch of things could have gone wrong when putting in this engine. But luckily, guys, we figured it out, and it was as simple as just two grounds that went unconnected to the chassis. So we got those in, and this car started up, and it starts up beautifully, guys, and we did it. But now we have another problem on our hands. We cannot get this thing into gear. Now, again, it could be a bunch of things as well, but I'm thinking we're gonna start with these first two things. So before we started the car, I went and took out the transmission fill plug to fill it with transmission fluid, but either the car's been sitting for so long that all the transmission fluid kind of just settled back into the transmission. So when I took the fill plug out, a bunch of transmission fluid came out. So I was thinking, okay, we're gonna run the car, run it through the gears, and then it should level out. The level should go down after it runs through the transmission cooler and everything, and then we can fill it up. But I couldn't get it into gear. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take off that fuel plug, and transmission fluid shouldn't come out now because maybe it's just low and that's why it won't go into gear. If it's still full on transmission fluid because we can't get it into gear, then the next thing might be that this car might not go into gear just because it's all off of the floor. Maybe the wheels have to be on the ground for it to register itself to go into gear. Oh yeah, looks like it's low now. It got all sucked into the system. All right, let's fill that up. Must have to be on the ground. Alright, let's see if this theory is debunked. Cars on the floor. Maybe there's something blocking it. Let's take all this apart because this should be working. Alright, let's try it now. Oh! Oh snap, guys, it's finally driving. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah. Absolutely unreal. This is insane. That was a successful first drive, guys. I can't believe this thing's finally running. It's been sitting at the shop in the background for months, guys, while we've been working on the Supra and everything, but it's finally driving under its own power again, guys, and we did that all in one video. Alright guys, well, it may have seemed a little bit optimistic at the start of the video, but we did in fact get to start this car and drive it. There was a couple hiccups in the process of doing so, but luckily we got it into gear. It was just a little bit low on some transmission fluid, and once we got cycled through the system, we had to fill it up some more, and then it finally went into gear, guys. And this thing drives, and not only does it drive, but it drives good. So next up for this car, guys, is we're going to be going ahead and getting completely finished up. And right now the Supra is still at the dealership. They're still programming it. It's been there for about over a week already. So hopefully they can get that thing done, and then we can make a video on that soon and get that car wrapped up. But this one's almost coming to a close too, guys. If you guys are loving this Hellcat build or any of the other builds, be sure to go down below, hit that like button while you're at. There's a shiny red subscribe button that you should click. And guys, if you are liking these builds, then there's more of them on the Instagram channel. I'll have that link down below as well. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!